Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this incredible space to talk about incredible things. And today, Holy Mother of all that is holy, I need you to buckle up because sometimes I get to talk to people that have inspired me for years. And this guest today, Dr. Marc Brackett, is somebody that I have, admired. First of all, I'm mad because he has the best book titles of all time. If I could, I'm so sad about particularly his last book. There's a new book coming out, which is also equally as well named, but Permission to Feel is a book that revolutionized so many things for me because for so long I've only talked about emotional regulation. And I felt like I was the only one talking about emotional regulation, not like emotional intelligence, and everybody puts like stupid names on it. But emotional regulation is the heart of everything. And this idea, simply, clearly, permission to feel, Marc has just made so easily accessible. And he's the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, so knows his shit. And I cannot believe I get this time with you today. So how are you? How are you, Dr. Brackett?
I am good. I'm a little, you have, as I remember, I think I'm having a flashback to my personality where I was talking about how I'm an introvert and how like people who have lots of energy intimidate me, and then you came on stage after my presentation,
and scared the ever loving fucking Jesus out of you. I know. Afterward, you sent me a note, and I don't know if it was your team or you, and it was basically, it said something like, "So, like, good to see you today. You're a lot."
Everybody's got to be who they are.
Which is true. Oh my gosh. Okay. So many questions. Can you start at the beginning for me? And, I love what inspired you to do this. Uncle Marvin, I know, is a massive part of your story. There's some early trauma. Can you give me a snapshot of how the road that it has taken you to come to this place to do such, I think, transformational work for people in a time where we've never been this disconnected?
Yeah. So, I think, the brief version of it was that I had a pretty tough childhood. I don't look like somebody who had a tough childhood now, but two parents grew up in a town called Clifton, New Jersey in the States, and two parents who loved me a lot. I wouldn't say they had like degrees in emotional intelligence, right? My mother was on the neurotic side, but, seriously anxious and depressed. And my father just had a lot of anger that was not dealt with very well. I have two brothers. One is 7 years older than I am. The other is 11 years older than I am. And so when I was about 6 years old, my one brother was psychiatrically hospitalized for schizophrenia. He did not have schizophrenia. He had conduct problems. And my eldest brother was hospitalized as well because he had Crohn's disease. And so he had some serious challenges, obviously with digestion and had to leave college. And so my mother she had this 6-year-old little boy in, first grade, and these two sons who were really not doing well physically or, mentally. And a lot of energy went to figuring out how to get them the help they needed. And unfortunately, during that time, the person who took care of me was a pedophile. And so I was abused by my parents' close friend for about 4 to 5 years. Wow. And because it really took a while for our family to get things together with what was happening. Okay. And not a good period of my life. And, with that said, when I was around 10 and a half, 11, my mother's brother, whose name was Uncle Marvin, was an interesting character. If you ever saw the movie Dead Poet Society, he was kind of like the Robin Williams character. He was a teacher by day and a band leader by night, and just was this like amazing human being. And
a juxtaposition. It sounds like a juxtaposition, as it were. Yeah. Cool.
And just by some wave of a magic wand, he lived with us one summer because he was getting his master's degree in psychology and counseling.
Cool.
And he happened to be writing a curriculum to teach kids about feelings. This is back now about 1980.
Yeah.
And we would sit in the backyard of my house, and he'd ask me questions like, have you heard of the word alienation? And I'd be like, no, what's that mean? And he's like, well, it's that feeling when you're left out and when you feel sad about it and you feel not connected. And
Mm-hmm.
he'd say, you ever feel that way? And let me tell you when I felt that way. And then we talk about feelings like elation, which I didn't have a lot of stories to share about.
Yeah.
And so we would have these conversations about feelings as he was writing his curriculum. And just one day, he must have asked me a very particular question about a particular feeling. And all of a sudden I shared, what I was going through because I had not shared it with my parents.
Okay.
For a it's a whole nother
Variety of
podcast.
reasons. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But, and so Uncle Marvin, radically changed my life because the person who was my, the abuser got arrested. And slowly I came out of my, trauma because of his, support and love. It caused quite a bit of a ruckus actually on where I lived because the neighborhood freaked out about it. And then we found out other people had been abused and nobody wanted to talk about it. But, my point, is that, I share that story in the opening of my book because I've been asked now in my 50s and in my 40s, why are you so passionate about teaching kids emotional intelligence and, why do you do the work? And I used to say, well, I hated school because I did not do well in school.
Yeah.
Go figure. I was bullied badly. And that was even
Yeah.
during and after the abuse. And those are legitimate reasons, why I do the work I do. But the real reason is that I didn't have permission to feel. I was eating my feelings. I was suppressing my feelings. I was denying them and all those other things. And then there was one individual that came into my life who changed everything.
It only takes one. Hey.
Yeah.
And I think that, so many times we talk about that now. And I'm interested, Marc, in your take on the development now of the accessibility to so many people, but the lack of accessibility to regulated face-to-face human contact.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at the data around, I think I can't remember where I got this statistic, but it is estimated that we look at our children 72% less of the time than our great-grandparents did.
Mm.
And one of the ways that you teach, is so much about showing. Right? How do you regulate emotion? For sure, you can ask those questions, but I got to show you, I can't tell you. I can't tell you how to calm down, right? So tell me a little bit about the components of emotional intelligence from your perspective and how critically important is this idea of regulating emotion in a world that is disconnected, right? Can we teach kids how to regulate on screens? Can we, and spoiler alert, I don't think we can. So I'm just interested in where you see this going. How do you feel about what's happening to this next generation?
Well, let me start by saying emotional intelligence is a set of skills. Like they're real skills. So for example,
you're not born with them.
No.
Okay.
You're born with a temperament.
Okay.
You're born with a proclivity to experience the world a certain way. Some of us like you, experience it in big ways. And some of us like me, a little bit less so. But I'm joking. But, obviously you're an extrovert. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but at least you're outwardly one.
Right.
And I'm more of an introvert. I'm an introvert who is socially competent, right? And so I can play the extrovert game on a stage, but then I run away and hide and ask people not to follow up with me. And so that's kind of like your experience in the world.
Yeah.
But what you do with that information is emotional intelligence. So am I accurately reading or recognizing my emotions? So am I paying attention to what I'm feeling? Am I paying attention to what you're feeling? Am I accurate in my, appraisal of what you might be feeling?
Right.
Then there's you of emotional intelligence, which is understanding my feelings and your feelings. And I think this is a big one because, the simplest way of thinking about it is like we feel angry because of injustice. We feel disappointment because of unmet expectations. And I think that's the cognitive piece of it, which is important. But for me, as I've thought about this more and more in my career, I think what's the most important piece is for me to understand what brings you to the feeling of anger and what you should understand what makes me feel angry. So I may not be able to understand the injustices that you see in the world, but you may not be able to see the ones that I see. And that's okay, because we're different people and we have different genders and different countries we grew up in and different racial and ethnic backgrounds, etc. But I don't think that we can have a society where people don't have interest in the reason why other people have their feelings. And so to me, that's the core of it.
Okay.
Then there's the labeling piece, which is the language. Do I have a rich vocabulary? Is everything like using, do I feel like shit or am I fine? Right? That's kind of like, that doesn't really tell you much, because what kind of shit is it? Is it deep, dirty shit?
Exactly.
Or is it, light, airy shit, which doesn't sound very interesting either. But the, my point is it down, disappointment, hopelessness, despair, or is it peeved, irritated, angry, enraged? Same
So
thing.
the more you have, the more opportunities you have to describe it. Instead of the word just mad, sad, shitty, I give myself much more opportunity to understand or to express.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it. I mean, I know that you're interested in children and adults with learning differences. And so I worked with a district in New York City with children on autism spectrum, as well as other they called it emotional disturbance.
Yeah.
I hate that term, but it is a
Me
term.
too. Yeah.
And so these were kids who were, throwing desks at their teachers. They were very dysregulated.
Yeah.
And then we introduced our mood meter tool, which is, from my book, and these kind of yellow, red, blue, and green quadrants. And then we introduced the language. And so, for example, I'll never forget, I was in this one classroom and the teacher, whispered to me, she's like, I really can't tell you this because it's illegal, but I used to go home, with welts on my body from the kids, kicking and punching me. And I never reported it because I love these kids. And she said, I know that your program works because I don't have welts anymore.
Wow.
And I said, well, can you, of course I'm like hysterical crying for this woman. And it was very, it was very deep. And I said, well, what is it? She's like, well, now, when they're in that red quadrant, what would happen in our school is that the kids would have, they get angry, but it would be like enraged. They'd throw stuff, and then the officers would come into the classroom, pull the kids out, put them into a rubber room or a peace room or whatever you want to call it, and like sometimes restrain them. And she said, but now we've taught them what peeved means. They actually have a language for peeved and annoyed and irritated. And they know the difference between peeved, irritated, and annoyed, and angry and enraged and livid. And so when they're starting to get that negative thinking, or they feel their body's getting tight, they can raise their hand and say, I'm feeling peeved right now. I need a strategy.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to regulate little emotions than big emotions. So I think that's the value of what I'll call, having a nuanced vocabulary.
Okay. I love that.
It helps you. And it just gives you, it's like even when you're looking at other people's facial expressions, if you have one word called anger, then it's all the same.
Yeah.
But when you can differentiate, it's quite different.
And to that point, I mean, I think one of the greatest learnings for me in this field has been the difference between us trying to cognitively describe things and get people to switch the focus into the feeling part of things, right? Which historically, particularly men, those who identify as men, have less capacity to do that. So I don't know if you know this, but I do a lot of work.
Socialized, by the way. That's not.
It's not a capacity, right? But again, it's a set of skills. So if you have not been provided those opportunities, right? As you said, you don't integrate those. So one of my favorite questions in any therapeutic experience, and I work lots with police officers who've been, have never talked about a single thing for 30 years. One of my favorite questions of all time is, where do you feel it? And can you tell me the difference, between asking that question? Because I know it was an Uncle Marvin turning point for you. Can you explain to everybody why this is important, instead of like, what happened to you? The difference between, experiencing abuse or a divorce or, whatever, being bullied. What happened to you? What happened on the scene of an MVA? People can do that so much better sometimes than when you switch the question into, okay, yeah, logistically, I get it. He pushed me. This happened. She was a son of a bitch because she took me for everything. She did this. Cool. Where did you feel that? And people often switch. Can you tell me the difference between those two?
Well, they're different, complete things, I think. One is, some people feel emotions are in their body more than other people. I think that's just the way we are. Some people are more cognitive, and I think it's all okay. Um, but as a scientist of emotion, what I'll argue is that no matter what, even if we're feeling it in our body, it's still coming from our brain.
Yeah, tell me more. Tell me more.
The brain is where we process sensation. And so, some people, may, you know, you get nervous, you have little butterflies in your stomach, but it's still coming from, the appraisal of something in the environment, that is causing this shift in your body and in your brain.
Yeah.
The,
And so, sorry, keep going.
No, I want to go back to, so where we were going through emotional intelligence, I just want to complete my thought there. So there's the recognition of emotion and self and other.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily with language. That's more around like when I see your facial expression change, it's telling me something happened in the environment in our relationship. I'm not quite sure what it is because I can make a good guess, but that whole like everybody's, smiles when they're happy and frowns when they're sad is not really true. It's not that simple. You really have to know the reason, the understanding, like what did I say? What is it? Are you feeling anger? Are you feeling shame? Are you feeling frustration or overwhelm?
Yeah.
And that's where the language comes in. So RUL in our model of emotional intelligence is really about understanding my experience and your experience of emotion.
Right. Right.
Then it goes into what you were asking a little while ago, which is, then what do I do with these feelings? Do I express it? Do I hold it in my body? Do I go outside and yell and scream? What's my strategy for regulating? And so E and the R is expressing and regulating emotion. Now,
Okay.
before I jump into, I want to say that for 20 something years, I ran around really focused on the skills of teaching these explicit skills and building tools to do it.
Okay.
And I got a lot of resistance just everywhere I went. It would
Really?
be like I would go into a Fortune 500 company C-suite, and the CEO would say things like, "Look at my office. Do you really think I need to learn these skills?" And I'd be like, "Well, everybody who reports to you hates you, so probably." I would
Right.
go
The
to
soft skills. Yeah.
schools, and it was like, my job is not to talk to kids about feelings.
Yes.
And so then I was writing my book, Permission to Feel. And, as I was writing it, I didn't have a title for it yet. I wasn't sure. And I was giving this speech to about 150 school principals in a very impoverished area of Connecticut. And the short story of this was that I was online at lunch, and I looked at this guy. He was like a big, beefy, tough guy. And I said, what do you think of the training? And he's like, I think the lunch is going to be pretty good. And I'm like, oof, he's not into it. He's not going to be into learning the skills. He's got a kind of an emotional block, an attitude or a belief system that's not aligned with the skill set.
Yeah.
So I made him my project. I'm like, I'm going to reach this guy if it's the last thing I do in my career. So at the end of this 2-day institute, I just randomly called on him in the middle of the room. And I said, 2 days ago, you didn't think, it was going to be so great. What do you think now? And this guy stands up like 6'2", as I said, like a built guy. And he just starts crying in front of his 150 peers. And he looked at me and he said, all I have to say is thank you for giving me permission to feel. And I'm like, that's the title of my book.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, it was an eye-opening moment for me because I realized that until he felt it, talking about in the body, until he saw the value of emotion, he wasn't going to pay attention to me learn these skills. It just had no meaning to him. Mm-hmm. And so since writing Permission to Feel, I've done these very large studies about permission to feel. Like, do you have permission to feel? Did you grow up feeling like you could be your true, full feeling self? And what I find is that only about a third of people across the world believe, that they have this kind of permission to feel. And so,
really,
yeah.
What do you anticipate as we navigate this world in this moment? do you think that number is going to decrease? Like a third for me feels, I mean, that breaks my heart, first of all.
Exactly.
And it's, I mean, as I understand it, as you're saying, it's freedom. It's freedom to heal, to make sense of the world. We get inundated with data all the time. And if only a third of us at best are giving light to those things, that means that's 2/3 of us are spending a lot of time in unprocessed emotion or staying stuck in many ways. Right. And do you see that as a direct reflection, a connection at all to significant increases in anxiety and depression, reported globally?
Well, I have good data on that. So
yeah, I know you do.
But let me clarify a little bit. So the question in the research is very simple. I mean, I do many different studies, but the one I'm talking about right now for this particular point is just I ask people to reflect on their childhoods, go back to elementary school, middle school, high school, and I just ask them, was there a caring adult? Was there a person who created the conditions for you to talk about feelings and be your true self? And that's what breaks my heart, is only a third of people say yes. Now, of that third, half of them say it was their mom.
Okay.
And the other half say it was just, an aunt, an uncle, a coach, a neighbor. But hear this out, talking about men, only 2% say it was their father.
Shut up.
And so, that's alarming. So that means if you add up the full 100%, that 85% of people do not see their own parent as the person who gave them permission to feel. Now, that to me is heartbreaking, that we are somehow or another, the people who are raising children don't feel or don't have the skill set to show up for their own kids. And so there are 3 characteristics of these, I call them the Uncle Marvins, which are non-judgmental, good listeners, and show empathy and compassion. And by the way, I've done this now, forget about like parent child or adult kid. I've asked people this in the workforce, do you have an emotional ally at work?
Okay.
And,
yes.
It's about 50% on average, a little higher.
Okay.
Which is interesting. I think it's because people feel like I can be the ally, and then I go home to my house. You go back to your house. I don't have to live with you. It's a little easier to be.
There's less skin in the game.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But in terms of outcomes, what I find in the research is people are way better at regulating their emotions as adults if they had the Uncle Marvin.
Yes.
B, better physical health, better mental health. Believe it or not, better sleep quality.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And about 15% higher life satisfaction and purpose and meaning in life as adults.
Okay, so this takes me back to this concern that I think about. So what you're saying, or what I hear you saying, is the idea that if you have the ability to process emotion, to regulate it in a way, to put the experiences that you have, the big feelings that we all have, that's not going to change. Okay, so we're in this world where we're biologically wired for connection. We're going to interact with people and things. We will never be devoid of feelings. So we have all of these feelings. If we have somewhere to put them and make sense of them, and often we can't do this alone. Is this true?
Well, I think this is where people sometimes get a little pushback. They're like, oh, now, Mark, you think you're giving me permission to feel? And
oh my God.
I'm like, well, it probably sounds like you don't have it based on the way you just phrased it.
Yeah, now listen, bitch.
And I think the answer is that kids are growing up in contexts, whether they're at home, on the playground, or in school.
Okay.
And they are shaped by the adults and their peers around them. And so if you grew up in my situation where my mother would say, I can't talk to you about this right now, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. Or you grew up with my father who would say things like, son, you better toughen up. If you talk to your mother that way one more time, I'm going to lose it. And he lost it plenty of times. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not giving me permission to feel. Yeah. That's basically saying, Mark, suppress, deny, ignore, go to your room, You can cry, you can bang your head against the wall, but we're not talking about how you feel because I don't really care how you feel. It's all about me. And in my definition of permission to feel, that's you are not creating the conditions for kids to have permission to feel in those environments.
Okay.
And so,
Do you,
does
yeah,
that make sense?
100%. And do you think sometimes, and I spend a lot of time talking to adults about their parents' capacity or desire to do that. And so many times people will look back at their parents and be like, they fucked it up because they didn't, they shut me down every time. They told me I should toughen up, be a man. And I often question, the ability, you can't give away something you've never received. So if we come from a number of generations where nobody showed dad how to do that. Now, he might have had a little bit more proximity. Maybe words weren't necessary because we could see looks on faces now. If our houses are astronomically bigger, we're raising our babies in places where I don't even know where my kids are, that we're in the same house here, but I'll text them if it's lunchtime. That didn't happen when we lived in, 200 square feet. So some of those words weren't necessary because you could feel it from your dad. Now, if I'm thinking I'm not in front of my kids, because even in this season, I talk often to women, but I'm away, I'm working, yes, you need to be everything you need to be. And yes, we can do all these things. If we spend less and less time face to face or being able to read those emotions, do you anticipate a cost to that? What do you
Well, we know there's
foresee?
a cause. That's pretty, the research is pretty clear there.
Okay.
We've only seen increases in anxiety and depression and loneliness over the last decade. And I think, there's something, and it also, like you said, it's pulling us away from face-to-face time where you see emotion.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to say is that going back to the parent piece, as you were mentioning, when I interview parents and I say, what gets in the way? The top reason they say is time.
Okay.
And then I say, well, what are you doing? And then a lot of times it's like they're distracted or they want their own private time or downtime. I think a lot of people are scrolling for 2 hours on Instagram and, that 2 hours could be spent, playing a game with your kid or having a rich conversation. The second, though, is even more challenging, which is fear. That they say, well, if I'm going to be really honest with you, Mark, I don't want to say this in public, but I'll tell it to you, in your ear. I'm afraid to ask my kid how they're feeling because I'm not sure I want to hear what they have to say. And on top of that, I really don't know what I'm going to do about it when I hear it.
Yes. And I imagine dads in particular, and some of the research around this is fascinating to me, right? Like you throw yourself where you feel most confident. And I say this quite often in this season as a mother, a working mom who, I feel proud of the success, the company we built, all of the opportunities to speak globally. I get the question all the time, right? How does this affect your kids? Do you think your kids are going to pay the price? What about your marriage? What about all these things? And the answer is yes, there will be a cost to this. And so we're in this time where we will never automate relationship. We're going to need each other, I think, to be able to create a next generation of healthy people. And I will transition into our hope for the future in a minute, but I really want to think about, I spend a lot of time thinking about that cost and this idea that, so what? Like, I guess, so what do we do about it now? Like that fear is such a big thing. I feel much more confident in my work than I do as a mom. I'll tell you that for free. And so people are like, is it hard to be away from your kids? Fuck no. I would much rather be on a stage where I get to hang out with Marc Brackett and give high fives to 87 teachers that are like, that was amazing. You just changed my life. Than to come home and be like, Mom, I don't really know if I love this girl. I don't know if I like boys. I don't know if I like her. Do you think we should get it? Like, I don't know. I don't like, and I have a lot of resources.
Yeah, so I need you to pause for a minute. I'm going to now do a little therapy with you.
Thank you so much.
Here's the interesting thing in the research that nobody says that the person who gave them permission to feel is smart. Not that you're not smart.
Yeah.
Second, they never say fixer or problem solver.
Okay.
And I think that's super important. That we as kids, we as colleagues, we as partners are not looking to tell somebody how we feel because we want them to solve the whole thing for us and tell us what to do. We just want to have someone to talk about it with and to ask us good questions so that we can think about it and then maybe come up with a solution for ourselves. Nobody wants a solution given to them. Truthfully, they don't say that. They don't. The people that they admire or the people that, are their Uncle Marvins are not brilliant. They never say smart. They never even say wise. They say compassionate, good listeners who are non-judgmental over and over again, from Canada to the United States to Hong Kong to Australia to Italy to Spain to Costa Rica. And I want to just call that out, that people. So I think the fear of like, I'm not going to know what to say, I'm not going to know what to do, is actually illusory, because the real goal is to have the relationship and the kind of the synergy in terms of just being with, to have the conversation.
I love that point, and thank you for making that. And I wonder if our dads knew that more, if they would have had the capacity to sit with us. You actually don't need to fix this because you're not that good, and you can't fix it. I mean, I think about this all the time in the world of grief.
Mm-hmm.
People, at least everything, and those of us as grievers don't want the answer. Those of us as the grievees, the ones who are maybe trying to assist in the process, are always like, okay, did you try this? Have you tried this? You're fine. Let's plant a tree. Woo!
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so fascinating to me. I love that point. You have everything you need right now to assist your people.
That said, like, if you have the knowledge and skill about what works, you can make nice suggestions. Like, what do you need right now? Do you want to go for a walk? You want to take some breaths together? Do you want to talk about it? But
coming up the other side, and tell me if this makes sense. So I always think about it as a bit of a two-way process. It's like first sort of giving that permission, right? Tell me more. What's the hardest part? What am I missing? And that's scary as a parent, as a partner, as a CEO, because I don't know what you're going to say. What if
and you're going to think it's your fault? I mean, that's the other piece, that parents in particular think, well, my kid is anxious, my kid is depressed, my kid is being bullied. And they have all that self-blame.
Oh, and it stops it there. It doesn't mean you won't come up the other side. It doesn't mean as the boss, the leader, the CEO, the parent, it doesn't mean you'll make the suggestion or fix it, as we say. The piece that I think you're talking about that makes just so much sense to me is that first part of it, the permission to just feel it. And we skip that all the time when somebody we love or lead is distressed. We don't like it when people aren't calm. We like it best when people are emotionally regulated and they can use their words and make good choices.
Exactly.
They're predictable and safe. And when they're not those things, we understandably want it to be, you're good. Toughen up, Mark. I can't handle this right now. Okay. Zip it. Do you see what I'm going through? Okay. I have two people in the hot. And the intention is to get you back to regulation. The perception is, I don't even think,
I think the intention is for you not to be a problem for me.
Yeah, true. Maybe, right? And isn't that an interesting story, right? If that's what we assume the intention is, it makes me feel very differently about your mom than if I assumed her intention was just, please, you be okay, babe, because I can't handle another one not being okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, okay, so up that other side, the question then becomes, what do we do about this in this super noisy world? What are some of those thoughts? I mean, the new book, can you tell me a little bit
about that?
Yeah.
It's called Dealing with Feeling. And, that just a quick little story about that. So, I wrote this book, Permission to Feel. Very proud of it. It's done, a lot of it's now 30 languages.
Wow.
And, but then the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden people are like, Mark, thank you for giving me permission to feel. But what the hell do I do with all these freaking feelings, And while I had one chapter on regulation, I realized that I needed to really flesh that out for people. And I also struggled with regulating myself during the pandemic. I just was like, wow, this is a whole new world here. But I want to say something going back to permission to feel, because in my research on emotion regulation, the master strategy that predicts well-being among all the regulation strategies is permission to feel.
Really?
It goes back to your mindset.
Better than what?
better
Like,
than
what is this trumping?
self-talk, better than relationships even.
Really?
I mean, they all matter, and they have a cumulative variance, for lack of a researchy term, meaning that all the buckets of regulation matter. But if you want to pick the one that has the highest correlation with your well-being, the number one is permission to feel. That you give yourself that permission to feel. You see your feelings as temporary. You don't think that your life is over because you're anxious or sad. You realize that this is a moment in my life and it's okay to have this feeling. And just that radical shift in attitude about the feeling is a strategy.
So that's a strategy. Is it important that you have that, or you have people around you who can assist you in that process?
Well, it's
Give you that permission.
how you
Both?
develop it is a whole nother conversation. But because that is definitely modeled by other people for sure. But at some point, I just want to say this too, because, I've had people get upset with me in my presentations because they interpret it in a way that's, easily interpreted, which is, Mark, I'm one of those 2/3. I didn't have permission to feel. And so you're telling me that the people who did are happier, healthier, more effective, sleep better, have greater purpose in life. And I'm like, oh shit, like that is not the message I want people to leave my talks with. And so a couple of things about that. One is, at some point we have to look in the mirror and give ourselves permission to feel. We can't go backwards. Like, I can't change the fact that my mother was neurotic and my father was angry all the time. I now have a lot of psychological knowledge about that, and I've kind of put that in the parking lot. Okay. And I have to look in the mirror and say, Mark, you're doing the best you can. You're doing pretty good, actually. Look at you. Yeah. And I have to give myself that permission to feel. The second thing is I got to pay it forward. And what's magical about that is that when I create the conditions for the people I love and live and work with to have permission to feel, I can see it in their facial expressions. I can see the shift that I've created in their lives, and it has a dynamic reciprocal effect on me, because there's nothing better in life than helping someone else, feel good about their lives. Yeah. And I'll say there's a third piece, which is that if you're a parent with many kids, if you're a teacher in a school or a leader in an organization, and you do this in public and other people observe it, it changes the entire culture and climate.
You can't tell them, you have to show them.
Exactly.
Wow. I love that. So permission to feel was really like is it like a succession now into this next book, dealing with feelings?
Yes, but I start off with it always starts with permission to feel. Like, you can't give that up. It's not like next.
Yes. Okay, good. So there is that sense of like, here's how we ground, here's how we get there. Okay.
Then you got to know what you're feeling.
Okay.
And the labeling piece is critical for regulation, because the pathway to regulation comes through the experience. So regulating anxiety versus stress, very different. Regulating disappointment versus...
I got to know what I'm dealing with.
Yeah. And the pathway, I give so many examples in my book, for example, of, the kid comes home, I hate you. And you think, oh, they're angry. But they're feeling shame because someone left them out or made fun of them on the playground. And you're punishing them or trying to regulate their anger when you haven't really understood their experience to find out they're actually feeling humiliation and shame.
Yes.
And so what they need is love and support and some guidance, not being told to calm down.
Smarten up, yeah.
And then the other buckets are things that you would know, that most people know, they just don't practice. Like knowing how to breathe properly and engage in mindfulness exercises. You have to know how to shift the dialogue in your brain. If you're a self-saboteur, you are going to be miserable. And I don't know about you, but I feel like most of my negative self-talk is as a result of being gaslighted as a kid. Mm-hmm. Because, Mark, you're too fat. Your nose is too big. You're too feminine. It was just like, no matter what I did, someone had something to say about it. Yeah. Nobody intervened, and it became my reality. Because it just got reinforced and reinforced and reinforced, and nobody intervened to help me see a different way. And now as an adult, I have to look in the mirror and say, Mark, take the high road. Today is going to be a good day. It's okay. Yeah. And then you need the relationships piece. We need sounding boards. We need those emotional allies, even as adults. And then also, we need to take care of our biology because, parents tell me all the time, I'm trying to be my best self. And I say, well, what got in the way this morning? Well, I'm exhausted. Oh, okay. So your real strategy is you need better sleep, or you haven't moved your body in 2 weeks, or you're eating processed food and you're not getting the right nutrients to help you be a better regulated person. And then the last piece that I teach in my new book is really, in my vision, one of the most important things, which is two things. One is you need to look at your calendar and ask yourself, is my life working for me? And I like this, like with my new book coming out, I have like 50 presentations in a matter of a month and a half. And I'm thinking to myself, I can predict I'm not going to be happy. And so I'm intentionally finding those half days or that hour at night where I can take care of myself, whether it's treating myself to a massage, whether it's making sure I go to bed early, whether it's making sure I take that walk instead of taking the bus or the taxi, whether it's, going to the gym or, just meditating by myself for 15 minutes. And I have to build that in. If you don't build it in, it won't show up.
It's the discipline of connection
Yeah.
that I think we need to talk a little bit more about, because if left to our own devices, we will not do that. And we've never had so many opportunities, so many exit ramps to not. So
Yeah.
many sexy opportunities. Like Amazon, Uber, Meta, there's an $8.49 trillion market share capitalization of those things that just keep us from doing the stuff that would be good for our neurophysiology. And would you agree? I mean, many of the things you're talking about has to come down to your neurochemistry and altering that. That's the discipline. And they tend to be the hardest things to do. And so
because again, this goes back to a whole nother section of my book, which is around kind of how we have become lured into the quick fix. And so we think, that the Instagram post from the pseudoscientist telling you to throw your anxiety out the door is actually helpful. And I think it actually is very unhelpful. And it's like there's a social responsibility here that I feel, we can't control. And so we have to become educated consumers and limit ourselves.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that there's no script for that. I think that there's, a lot of conversation that makes everything else easily accessible. I'm so excited for this new book because I think that's really what we need to what do we do with this now? If we can feel all these feelings, how exactly do we go through the steps of then integrating those things? Two things. What is your biggest hope for the future of the clients that you serve? What is your biggest fear?
Well, my biggest hope is something that I have to figure out how to research, because I got the idea after I finished my book, although it's in there, but it's not like well thought out.
Okay.
Which is, my hope is that we as a society will rethink what it means to be successful, and that success equals being someone who is highly skilled in emotion regulation.
Okay.
And that we make it part of our identity. So I literally wake up in the morning and I'm like, Mark, you are the Yoda of emotional intelligence. Like, you can do this. And it's just how I see myself. I view myself. When someone, like, if you were to like attack me or trigger me or whatever it might be, I would just have all at my kind of right available to me, the ability to manage that effectively, to not allow myself to be taken over by, whatever had happened.
The triggers, yeah.
And my biggest fear is that, we have a lot of competing priorities in our society, that will make people less skilled at regulating their feelings over time. And so it's funny, as I've been rethinking the strategic plan of our own Center for Emotional Intelligence at Yale, one thing that I've done is double down on thought leadership. So I have to do research because I got to publish the papers, because that's what I do as a scientist. But I feel it's more of a moral obligation to get out there more and to share the science and write pieces for newspapers and magazines and be on television to share what the science shows about healthy regulation so that people make better choices for their well-being.
I love that. I love that so deeply. And I think, the question I often have in my head is, what is going to be the greatest contribution as, you do this work as I do this work. And I really think that we spend a lot of time serving kids, a lot of time serving bad guys, a lot of time serving the people who struggle mentally. And I get that. I mean, that's always been the concern. But I think if the big people aren't okay, the little people don't stand a chance. If we don't spend more time investing in the caregivers, the teachers, the parents, it's a waste of time. And I think all of the time about this in my practice. You're going to, bring a kid to me. Can you see my child? They're hitting, kicking, biting, and they're assholery-ish. Cool. Absolutely. But I need to see you too. In fact, I need to see you first. And the pushback is always, well, you think I'm the problem. But you're the solution. Because if you're not okay, right? And so I love the consideration of then how do we shift the way that we historically have served this world in healthcare, in human sciences, to figure out what's wrong with people and treat them. But much more about how do we treat the people doing the holding, because they have never been this inundated with overwhelm and dings and buzzes.
Yeah, I see it as in a very similar way, which is that if we only invest in interventions, the number of new cases that enter into the system will never decrease.
Yeah.
And so we need to be prevention scientists. We need to think about developing the skills early on and letting them continue to grow throughout development.
Yeah. Amen. I am so excited to see what you do with this. I am such a huge fan, Mark. Thank you for doing this. It was a dream for me. The new book, we're going to put everything in the show notes. I would highly recommend Permission to Feel. It's one of my faves, and I can't wait to read the new one. So thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Jody.